Jimmy Sengenberger, and I am not running for office. You see, the future of this country is in doubt. We are looking right now at the national debt higher than it's ever been before. Indeed, a president who has added more debt to this country than all previous presidents combined. We all know that. We know and understand how intrusive President Obama and the previously Democratic-controlled Senate have been when it comes to our health care. Taking away our individual choice and opportunity, causing people to lose their health insurance because the government, which is all-knowing and all-powerful, doesn't believe that your health insurance is the kind of insurance that it should be. It doesn't qualify. You're a 31-year-old single male and it doesn't have maternity coverage or prenatal care. You gotta get a new plan because that doesn't qualify. Never mind that you're a 31-year-old single male and you might have a little bit of an issue with the whole pregnancy thing. But that's neither here nor there, because you see, you should have that. That's a basic right that should be included in your health insurance. We look at education, a lot of concern about Common Core and nationalization of standards. Now, this began with Republicans. George W. Bush, 2001, it's not a partisan issue. He partnered with Ted Kennedy. You know, if you partner with Ted Kennedy on anything, it's going to come out to be something pretty bad. And he paved the way to Common Core, where then we saw race to the top in 2010, and Colorado, the democratically controlled legislature, Governor John Hickenlooper, raced to get that money. And now we did not receive a dime specifically associated with that program, yet we have all these standards with SB 191 and other things that we have to deal with in this state. As a result of the federalization of education, which has also constrained our choice. I know everybody in this room understands one common precept, and that is that parents should be able to choose what is the best school for their children. Because that opportunity for every child is essential. It's not something that we can just throw up our hands in the air and say, forget about it. Let the public school system handle it. And there are great public schools. I'm a graduate of public school. I have nothing against public schools. But giving parents choice and opportunity, I think, is something fundamental. Being able to have choice in living your life, period, is crucial. Making economic decisions and understanding that capitalism, the free market system, is all about, as individuals, entering into voluntary exchanges. That you're able to make choices of your own, influence people. That's what this country is about. That's what we were founded on. Was the idea that each and every individual had unalienable rights, although of course they use the word inalienable. And it is remarkable to see the transition that we have seen over time in this country. You look at the last 100 years, what happened in 1913, just a year ago, 101 years ago. 4 key things. 17th Amendment was put into effect, basically eroding federalism when it comes to how states are represented in the Congress. The 16th Amendment went into effect as well. Good old income tax. We've seen what that's done for our country. Also, the Federal Reserve went into effect. And I'm sure everybody here is a big fan of that and what Bernanke and now Janet Yellen are doing. Driving our dollar, the value of our dollar down until there's no end in sight. And finally, a little guy, you might have heard of him, named Woodrow Wilson, became President of the United States. 4 key things in 1913. What has happened ever since 1913? We have seen the country go down and the size and scope of government go up. You see, there's something in the water in America where we seem to buy into this notion that government will be the solution to our problems, contrary to what Ronald Reagan said. That if we empower government, and give it the tools and the resources, people's lives will be better. We see how that's worked out with the war on poverty, $14+ trillion spent, and our poverty rate is, oh wait, it's about the same as it was in 1966 or so, just a couple years after the war on poverty began. It didn't work out quite so well. We understand these issues, and it's important that we do. But average Americans, people who are not active, maybe people who are more moderate, could be people who are liberal, who could be persuaded to see the light of the right, as I said. They don't get it. And that's because we have been losing the messaging war. We have not been successful at branding conservatism in a way that is positive, that connects with people, that relates to them on a personal level. If I were to ask you, what is conservatism? What kind of an answer would you give? You'd probably say conservatism is an ideology or a base of principle that's all about limited government, personal responsibility, individual freedom, free markets, strong national defense. Those are the things that you always hear when somebody's asked to describe conservatism. Here's a problem with that. What do those phrases even mean? What does it mean, individual liberty, if, say, you don't want to have gay marriage? Or you aren't pro-abortion? Are you then violating the precept of individual liberty? Just as one example of a counterpoint that the left may throw. You talk about limited government, well, what about those people that are in need, that are impoverished, that need somebody to come in, and that somebody has got to be the government because they've got these resources? How are you going to be able to counter that when all you've got in the back pocket of your pants is to say, look, we want limited government, or you say Dennis Prager, my, if you will, KNUS colleague, says the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. Very true, but it's tough to relate to that on a personal level. Defining conservatism in and of itself is a challenge. But let's look at liberalism. What is the liberal argument? Well, I've got here the words of somebody named Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You may have heard of him. And he wrote and said, as new conditions and problems arise beyond the power of men to meet as individuals, it becomes the duty of government itself to find new remedies with which to meet them. Government has the definite duty to use all its powers and resources to meet new social problems with new social controls. Listen, new social problems with new social controls. We can look at Woodrow Wilson as the godfather of liberalism. You will not hear me use progressivism. I believe freedom and liberty are progress, and the Constitution is progress, away from big government, taking away individual freedom. So I won't use that word progressive. Progressives are regressive, bringing us back to a time when the government grows and grows and grows. That's their objective. So I say liberal, and I will continue to use that phrase. And he is sort of the godfather of modern liberalism. So you've got one key argument from the left, and that's the government has the resources to meet the problems that people have in our society. So why not use them? The second key argument that we hear then is negative, against conservatives. Paul Krugman, my favorite liberal to tear to shreds on the radio, said, liberals want to restore the middle-class society I grew up in. Those who call themselves conservative want to take us back to the Gilded Age, undoing a century of history. I'll agree with that last part. I'd like to undo a century of history, but I don't think that means we're going back to any Gilded Age. Liberals defend long-standing institutions like Social Security and Medicare. Remember, all you grandmothers out there, we conservatives want to push you off the cliff. That's what we want to do. Those who call themselves conservative want to privatize and undermine those institutions. Exactly as I said. We want to push you off the cliff. Liberals are those who believe in institutions that limit inequality and injustice. But conservatives, in essence, want to perpetuate those issues. So you've got the kind of positive argument. In the words of George W. Bush, when somebody hurts, government's got to move. Mr. Compassionate Conservative. But that's the ideology of the left, if you want to sum it up. If you want to put it this way, it's the product of the left. Is that government has resources. They are able to provide aid to those most in need. Because all you need to do is just throw $1 trillion in this direction, and you're going to improve people's lives, right? But it's an easy argument to make. Somebody is in need. There are people who are poor, who can't survive, who need help. And how are we going to do it? Well, we need government. Now, you're not going to tell me, you can't sit there and tell me that that is not compelling on an emotional level. If you hear the way Barack Obama has talked about poverty in the past, especially in the past, when he was running for president in 2008, talking about bringing back the middle class, spewing all of that rhetoric, it touched the heartstrings. Well, what is our message? Limited government, personal responsibility, free markets. Not pulling on those heartstrings. But here's the fundamental difference that brings us to what the conservative product is and how we can clearly define it. Because before you message something, before you can market it, you have to know what the product is. So how do we get there? I would submit to you that liberals have a very, very negative view of the individual. They believe that individuals are people with problems that need to be fixed, and only government and society can step in and fix them. Whereas conservatives, those of us on the right, genuinely believe in the unlimited potential of each and every human being. That if you work hard, you have determination, you have that fire in your belly to make your life better, you can do it just as our forefathers did. We believe that people themselves can improve their lives. They don't have to turn to Barack Obama and say, hey, Baracko, give us a little help here. We don't believe in that. We don't need that. And that brings us to the conservative product. We want to unleash the unlimited potential of the individual. And that's how we're going to rediscover liberty in America. That may sound like a slogan. You can choose to use it, you can choose not to use it. Identifying the product in and of itself isn't a slogan. Getting a Macintosh computer, by saying Macintosh, that's not a slogan unless you're running for office. Then it can be a slogan, and you can say, and I'm not making any endorsements here, by the way, let me just make that clear. But that essentially is our product, and then when we look at its features and its benefits, then we start looking at limited government and defining that as a government that is constrained, whereby our individual rights are not trampled upon. Where if we are a business, like Hobby Lobby, or we are the little sisters of the poor nuns, and we want to make a decision about whether or not to include a certain type of coverage that we may deem immoral in our health insurance plans that we offer our employees or people associated with us, we cannot do that. We believe in a government that is constrained from violating individual rights. A government that lets us express our views freely without trying to advocate, as the left did in the past, a fairness doctrine. That we need to have balance on everything. Something we continue to see today. Free markets, that means we actually have the ability to enter into voluntary contracts. If I want to go to the store and buy a phone, I get to decide if I want to A, buy the phone, and B, if I want a smartphone, and C, if I do want a smartphone, do I want an iPhone? No, I don't want an iPhone. I like Android. I prefer it. Sorry, Mr. Macintosh, I'm not a big fan of Apple aside from the iPhone. But I get the choice between that or say the Samsung Galaxy S4, which I decided. That's what free markets provide. And not only that, but consider the jobs that are created. I'll use the iPhone as an example because that did get the trend started. We had a society which was just developing cell phones, really starting to use them, and he had an idea. Let's make them special. Let's add apps. Let's do these creative things. And now what do we see across the country? People making millions of dollars because of apps on phones. The jobs that are created from that are not limited strictly to the sale that's happening of the iPhone. It's also extended to everything else, all the other things that are involved. And I won't go into more detail than that, but to give you an example, you should look up the short read called The Pencil and find out exactly the significance of free market so you can have a better understanding of how to be able to explain it to people. And I could go on with some of the other features of conservatism, what that underlying product of unleashing the unlimited potential of the individual is about. But what about the benefits? We saw the benefits in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan. In fact, if you make the economic case clearly, we saw the benefits of what Reagan did in the 1990s. We saw the benefits of what conservative policies did, prior to Obama, of course, on welfare, with welfare reform. That was the one period of time where we actually saw a noticeable decrease in people on welfare rolls, getting back to work. We also can look at the cutting of the capital gains tax in the 90s and the dramatic growth in the economy that was spurred as a consequence of that. These are things that benefit people, that provide prosperity across the globe. We have been a beacon of freedom. We have been, in Reagan's words, the shining city upon a hill since our founding. Since we had that basic understanding that the individual is what matters most and is at the center of who we are as a people. And so we've got the product, we've got some features, we've got some benefits, and we can go on with the benefits. Social stability. If you want to talk about family issues, and I may address social issues and some of my wariness of talking about them today. But when you're talking about, say, the importance of the family and what that does, social stability, you have to make that kind of an argument. That's a benefit that can come from conservatism in terms of looking at values in society and who we are as a people. That's just as important as anything else. How we educate our kids. All of these things. We have to find a new way of looking at conservatism and then communicating conservatism. Once we've got all these pieces put together, then we're in a good position. We're ready where we can start talking about our positions and our views and be bold in our approach and take our advocacy of the issues and put it into action. That's why the key thing that I've really done in looking at how can we message conservatism, how can we rebrand conservatism as something good for society, not something to be maligned and ashamed of, or to be quiet about, or to have elected officials go to Washington, D.C. as conservatives and then come back as moderates because they got into that climate there. Where we saw President Bush and the Republican Congress, 6 years in control. They brought us No Child Left Behind, Medicare Part D. I can go on the kinds of things that they did, not to mention the national debt. But these are still, in many ways, intangible issues. And so I submit to you that there's a 4-step process that we should really be looking towards. I call it the 4 I's, or not to be exactly that myopic, let's go ahead and say the 4 N's to conservatism, because each of these words begin with the first 2 letters of in, and there's a reason for that. First, I say you have to interest people in the topic that you're talking about, whether it's healthcare, whether it's free markets, whether it's denouncing the climate change alarmists, whether it's talking about education. You need to interest them. I hope I interested you in the beginning when I started talking about the future of this country and how it is endowed. You have to engage them, and the left is so good at that. They start with that because they don't want to do the next step. That is really so necessary for conservatives because for one reason or another, we're actually logical in our arguments and try to think through our positions. We've got our principles. We've got them in our hearts. And then we come up with an examination of the issues and conclude with what we want to do with our policy prescription. We go through that process. The left doesn't. They just got their ideology and they're able to talk about inspirational things and it works. That's why we can't just interest in the topic, bring them engaged. We have to throw a few nuggets of information out there. Not too much. The average person isn't an activist like us. They can only take so much on the issues. This is an audience where you can come in and, with respect to Don, talk about point 1 and 8. An average person talking about numbers, that may be difficult to really come attached to. I know that from being on the radio, is that when people are just listening to you, it's challenging for them to follow what you're saying. Being able to see you is an important thing. It absolutely adds to it, but it can still be difficult to really latch on. That's why if you are going to use numbers, you do say, I'm going to give you 2 numbers, point 1 and 8. And you're very specific. You give them little nuggets of information, nothing to overwhelm them, but enough to help make your case. Then we do have to get to something that Ronald Reagan was so good at. It's the reason that he's known as the great communicator. And that's inspiring. Inspiring people to action, to believe in why your cause is so important, why they should take some sort of action, why they should believe what you believe. But you can't just leave it at interesting them in the topic, then informing them a little bit, then inspiring them on the issues. You have to give them something to do. And the left is particularly good at this. Because for Republicans and conservatives, we tend to think, well, let's go ahead and get them to sign our petitions, to vote for us, to go out and make phone calls, to knock on doors. And those are important for candidates. But how about just asking your friend to share an article on Facebook? Just go talk to a neighbor. Have a conversation. Dismiss some argument that's going on where they're trying to put some sort of a contention forward. Just try to provide a little thought-provoking insight into the issue. Don't limit yourself. Actually look at a number of things, a range of things people can do with their time, their talent, and their treasure. It's not limited to one thing or another. And that's what the left is so good at, is getting them active. Look at Barack Obama. He really knew how to get out there and get people engaged at a real bottom-up level, despite his philosophy being explicitly top-down. So that's my submission to you, is that I think we need to begin with interesting in the topic, then inform with some nuggets of information, as I did, for example, about conservatism. What is conservatism? And then boiling it down to the product. And then you talk about inspire. How do you inspire people to action? Getting them to actually do something and getting them excited and engaged. And that's where I hope it gravitates to this particular audience. You got to tailor it to your audience. That you all, when I said, look, we're terrible at really understanding how to grasp these issues, and we need to be better if we're going to take America back, that's inspiring in terms of looking at the broader picture, looking at how you can connect with your neighbor who may be a moderate or somebody somewhat left of center, but who's at least got an open mind. Although, of course, not like a liberal. As you know, they say liberals are so open-minded, their brains are falling out. And that's somewhat true, sometimes not true. It depends on the liberal you're talking about. There are some pretty smart liberals out there. Yep. You gotta give them credit for that. And then you have to involve them. So let me submit to you one particular example of how this can be done. And let's take Obamacare. And I'm not talking about the benefits of Obamacare. I'm not talking about whether or not we should have Obamacare. I'm not talking about whether we should be approaching a free market position as opposed to a government-dominated approach to health care. I'm talking about this argument. We set a target of 7 million, and we beat that by 1 million signups. We have more than 8 million signups across the country. Never mind, of course, Oregon, as we heard, pulling out, saying we're done with our exchange. Nobody's signing up here. California. I know a guy who's a broker in California who's been on my radio program a few different times. And he's talked about a lot of the challenges in the signature state of California. where they've looked at that state as a prime example. And I'm giving you all this as just some background lead-in. But this isn't what you would necessarily say in a conversation. I can say it to you, because you all know what I'm talking about. You're that audience. But if I'm talking to somebody who says, yeah, I know that Obamacare is not such a, may not be the best approach, but it's sort of the best thing we can do. And look, they've got 8 million people that have signed up for Obamacare. And I'd start by saying, in my case, I have a friend. His name is Jay. He's in his 60s. And he told me that he recently lost his health insurance. He had a great plan that he and his wife was just great for. And as a result of Obamacare, Jay lost his insurance. Thankfully, he found something new, but the doctor he'd seen for years was out of network. He's been seeing the doctor for years, and he can't see him anymore. He lost that choice. President Obama promised it, and yet he lost it. It hurts me. It really pulls at me, because he's a friend of mine. And to see him have to go through this, and to know other people who've gone through this, to read their cancellation letters and then see what they're going through. It's terrible when people don't have health insurance, and it's terrible when they lose their health insurance, and when they don't know where to go. So I agree with you, we need health insurance. We need to provide that. But this 8 million number you're talking about, I'm suspicious about it. And I got to give Mike Stoffler credit for this analogy that I'm going to use. You see, I have 13 friends on Facebook. 13,000, 1,300 friends. Excuse me. 13 friends, yes. Not 13,000. I'm not quite that popular. I have 1,300 friends on Facebook. And I'm going to tell you, every one of them is a good buddy of mine. I know everyone, I know their families, I know what they do for a living, I know what they enjoy, what cocktail they like. They're best, all 1,300 of them are best buds. In fact, I just signed up 3 more people as friends. I accepted their friend request, and I know them very well. I'm guessing that you probably don't believe me that everybody is a really close friend. Oh, wait. Mike, we've been friends for a long time on Facebook. I just met you last month or 2 months ago, though. Are these 3 people I signed up as friends last couple of days? Never met them. I've got 50 friends in common with them. And so I just click, yes, that's fine, so I can broaden my political network. So then your obvious question to me, isn't it, how many friends are you really close to? How many pretty good friends? How many people don't you know? How many people are friends with you just because they know that you're on the radio and they wanted to reach out and connect that way? Now you're trying to dig into the numbers, aren't you? Because you want to find these things out. Same thing with Obamacare. Do 8 million people really like Obamacare on Facebook, let's say? How many of them made the choice willingly to go on to Obamacare on Facebook and click like? How many of them are really close friends with Obamacare who were previously uninsured or previously didn't like them and then went ahead and decided to do so because they thought that it was the right thing that they needed for their family? How many of these people have actually contributed something, have liked a post, or in other words, have paid their premiums and actually truly have that insurance? How is that different from me saying I have 1,300 wonderful friends? 1,300 of my closest friends on Facebook, and I keep adding them on an almost daily basis. It's the very same argument that President Obama has given. And so when I look to Jay, or when I look to other letters that have been shared with me by friends on Facebook and elsewhere, or I see a recent friend who last week posted on his Facebook page that due to Obamacare, his family, himself, his wife, his daughter, and his soon-to-be born, I think actually recently born baby, that they've lost their insurance and have to go on to a new plan. They're going to be counted in the Obamacare numbers when they didn't want to sign up, when they had something they liked beforehand. Amen. And and now the government forced them off because of Obamacare? And they're struggling to figure out, what in the world am I going to do? How is that fair? How is that just to these individuals and what they've had to live through? You know, Don's here. He was on my radio show that I previously had been doing an online radio show on weekdays. And Don came in the studio, had a great hour-long chat. And he could tell you better about this story, but he talked about an employee that worked for him. She had cancer. Was it cancer? Was it another, a tumor? And she was 2 or 3 weeks away from her surgery. And I want to be clear, in case this video goes up, Don Itterberg is the guy I'm talking about. He's running for Congress in the 7th Congressional District, and he's going to win. He's a great guy. He said just a couple weeks before her tumor surgery, she lost her insurance. She got a letter canceling that insurance. Imagine you are 2 weeks away. 2 weeks away from having surgery, and you get a notice saying, sorry, you're cut off. Luckily, she was able to find alternative coverage in time. But not many people are so lucky. Not many people may have been able to find that opportunity. But the mere fact that she was so scared, doesn't that concern you? And yet, she's counted in the 8 million that signed up for Obamacare? I think you should really look into the numbers a little bit. Do a little research. Just take a few minutes to look into it. That's all I'm asking, is to look into some of the numbers. And then if you find something suspicious about it, you're questioning the numbers too, or you find an article that puts it in doubt, and it convinces you that there's at least questions for it, go post it on Facebook. Notice one thing there. I didn't say to whomever I was talking to, go call your congressman and tell them to vote to repeal Obamacare. I didn't say that. Don't go out there and call it. I didn't say call into a radio show and complain about Obamacare. Or go knock on doors to sign some petition calling for the repeal of Obamacare. I said just look a little deeper into the issue. And then if you find something there, if you think that I make a compelling case, and you find something in an article, go ahead and actually share it. Give it some thought. With a lot of people, you're not going to persuade them in one conversation. Or if you're a candidate for office, you're not going to persuade them in one speech at a Chamber of Commerce meeting. It's going to take more time than that. Your goal and your objective, especially as a candidate, say this to the candidates that are here, or those people who are working on issues. Your goal is to get average people, especially once you've sewn up the nomination, average people to go on the web, pull out their smartphones, and contribute to your campaign, or even sign up for your email list. And you're not going to do that if you go to the Chamber of Commerce, for example, your local chamber, and you say, I'm a conservative. I believe that we should have limited government and that we need free markets, and I think we need to keep our taxes low. So vote for me for this position because that's what I'm approaching it as. That's my approach. You need to actually get them engaged. You need to find a personal story, providing you have more than 30 seconds, of course. A lot of times, in 30 seconds, it can be tough. But even then, try to. Find a personal story. Like talking about that friend of yours, if you're running for Congress, that lost health insurance. Or that employee lost health insurance. And get them engaged in the conversation. And then inform them about it a little bit there. Give you some facts or give you some questions about the statistics, get the questions going. Inspire them. Say, again, you can go back to your interest story. What got them engaged? And then give them something to involve. I want to talk about one other issue. And that is student loans. And I say that because, especially for those of us young people who are here today, who have graduated from college, there's now a big argument, and we're going through college. It's a big debate, actually. He says on a lot of things the debate is settled. This is one area where, at least for the time being, the debate seems to be settled because of some things included in Obamacare and other legislation that was passed. And I'm talking about student loan forgiveness. And the argument, I hear it from many, many students, is that a college education is something you should have a right to. The government should forgive your student loans. Before I get to the 4 steps of that process, let me tell you something. I decided to go to Regis University. It's a private school. $40,000 a year. And my parents put in a certain sum, and I had to cover the rest through my own money or through taking out loans. I could have gone to a school much less expensive, CSU for example, or CU Boulder. I'd be warm and welcome in the People's Republic of Boulder. I should have chosen that one. Actually, they do have thriving college Republican presence there, so that's always a good thing to see. But nevertheless, I could have made that choice, or I could have done what my father did. We're originally from upstate New York. He went to Hudson Valley Community College for 2 years, and then went to Siena College for the rest of his 2 years. I could have done that. I chose to go to Regis University because I thought that would be the best experience for me. I had no idea that the Jesuits would turn out to be the hippies of the Catholic Church, but nevertheless, it was a great experience for me. However, I made that choice. I paid off thousands of dollars in my loans for the last 3 years. But I'll be honest with you, I'm willing to come out and say, I still have $17,000 in student loan debt. $17,000 that I will be paying off for years to come. But you know what? I made that choice. I made that choice because I felt it was the right decision for me and for my future. Nobody told me to go to Regis. I said I wanted to. I got into CSU, I got into DU, I got into Regis. And I decided I wanted to go the Regis route no matter how much it cost. Now, given I did come in with 18 AP credits, and I did maximize my time so I could graduate a year early, but that was a decision I made in order to keep my costs down. I have the responsibility to fulfill that.
Amen.
And so I then go and would say, go to young people who are saying student loan forgiveness. I've argued with some of these students, some of whom you cannot rationalize with on this issue. But if there are young people that are more moderate, that can understand this, go to them and say, okay, when you graduate from college, do you want to have to live in your parents' house for another 10 years? Do you want to have to go to mom and dad for every little thing that you need? Go to them and say, hey mom, hey dad, can you give me some money for this? Of course, they'll probably, if they're responsible parents at that point in time, say no, get a job. Do you want to have to go to your parents, when you're living under their roof, do you want to have to go to your parents and say, what time do I have to be home tonight? You're 25 years old. Mom, Dad, what time do I have to be home? Do you really want to do that? You're 25 and you want to be living at home and asking for permission on those things? So now you come out and we recognize that there is a student loan bubble. And we've got $1 trillion in student loan debt. They're saying it now surpasses credit card debt. And you're going to be going to college, or you came out of college and you've got this debt that you made a choice to do. If it's going to be forgiven, and we just say, no more student loan debt for you, the government's going to pay it. And so what does that mean? That means somebody else is paying for it, the government. Where does the government get its money? Well, actually, it's Obama money, if you remember. Where does he get it? I don't know, his stash. Remember hearing that a few years back when they were giving out some free money? Or I forget exactly what it was. His stash. Now, it's going to come from taxpayers. Now, you may have your student loans forgiven by the government in 20 years. But in 20 years, when you're in hopefully the prime of your money making of your life, you're in your mid-40s, and you are living your life, you've got a family, you want to take that vacation with your family, you've been promising that you're going to go to Hawaii, your kids are now teenagers, maybe, you promised them you're going to go to Hawaii, but God, you can't. Really? Why can't I go to Hawaii? I'm going to go to Hawaii. No, but you see, you just had a tax increase. You don't get to keep as much of your money as you thought you would. What? Wait a second, why is that? Why did that happen? Well, you see, what actually happened when we forgave your student loan debt was we went to China and we said, can you give us some money so we can pay it off to Ryan? Let's go ahead and do that. Thanks, China. But we have to pay it to China. So now here you are, 45, 50 years old, whatever. And you're not asking mom and dad for permission to go to Hawaii. You are essentially asking the government for permission to go to Hawaii. You go to them and say, hey, can I please have a lower tax rate? No, sorry, we can't do that. We've got $30 trillion in debt. We're not going to go over the numbers here because they're too confusing even for me to understand these numbers. The point is, that trip to Hawaii, don't count on it. Because not only are you not going to have Social Security, but you're not going to have a very hefty salary that's going to keep going. You're going to be dependent on the government. And if they push back, they may fight you, they may push, whatever. Fine. Just ask them to look into it. Look into it. Do a little research. Give them an article specifically and say, please promise me, just spend 5 minutes to read this. I know you can't keep your attention span for more than 2 seconds and you have to click to the next page, but take 5 minutes and read this. Now, it may or may not work with some people, but it's sort of the approach you have to take. You have to gain them some interest. You know, do you really want to be dependent on your parents for your life? No. I venture to ask anybody who's under 30 in this room, there are some of us here, how many of you actually would like to be dependent on the government? And, or rather your parents. It's probably going to be now. Yes, every woman in here is under 30, I know that. It's truth, ladies and gentlemen. My mom, every year she has her anniversary of her 29th birthday. It's true. It's absolutely true. And so you have to follow that step. Interest them with the story or with something. Inform them with some nuggets. Inspire them. Pull on those heartstrings a little bit. Or maybe pull on that trip to Hawaii or whatever they'd like to do with their money and their future. And then give them something to involve them in that process. That's what you got to do. That's how you connect. Every one of these issues, you got to find something to personalize. Because if you're not giving an emotional connection, if you're not reaching out and pulling somebody in to your position, how are they going to be persuaded of the value? How are they going to say, you know what, you're right? And how are we going to keep us from being a nation where we now have the highest, or rather the lowest labor participation rate in the country since 1978, and the lowest labor participation rate in Colorado since 1976, before Jimmy Carter was even President of the United States? If we are going to change things, if we are going to set our course right, we have to know what to message. We have to brand conservatism as something that is actually trying to help you. We don't want you to be dependent on the government. We don't want you to have to lose your insurance 2 weeks before you have a tumor surgery and begin scrambling to find some alternative. We want you to be free to live your lives unimpeded, to improve it, and to unleash the unlimited potential of the individual. And I will close with this. At Regis University, it is, as I mentioned, a Jesuit institution. And as our Pope may or may not, I am Catholic, may or may not show the Jesuits are the hippies of the Catholic Church. And there's a debate about that. I don't really think he's as left-wing as people say that he is. We could talk about that another time. At Regis, there's very much a liberal bias. There's no doubt about that. There's any college campus. I would contend it's as liberal as possible. But a very free and open opportunity to participate in the political process. To do what you want, to speak your way. So I did my 3-year radio program, 2 hours every Thursday night. You couldn't avoid, during dinner time, 2 hours of right-wing propaganda going across the quad to the student center. You couldn't. Because it was there. It was broadcasting out there. And so one alum called in or emailed the president. Because I had the audacity, as I mentioned, I would say earlier, to email the president of the university. Because I had the audacity to challenge the conventional wisdom. To say, you know what, there are questions to be had about global warming. That there is a debate. Maybe she was offended at how I referred to The Reverend Al Gore, head potentate and grand prophet of the Church of Climate Change of Latter-day Liberals. Maybe that offended her, but she sent an email. I was called in to a dean who happened to be the faculty advisor. He emailed me, he said, look, we got a complaint, Jimmy, coming into the university. And I want you to come in so we can talk about it. And he said, we got an email about this global warming stuff that you were talking about on the radio. And you know how we responded? We said every student at Regis University is able to freely express their ideas and their opinions, regardless of what it is. In fact, I'm sure that if you would like to go on Jimmy's show, he would be happy to have you on. Feel free to email us back if you'd like. How many want to bet that she sent an email back responding saying, I'm willing to go on Jimmy's show. Can I have the opportunity? We didn't get that response. But here's the thing. I was bold in my approach. I decided that I would challenge that conventionalism. I did it on diversity. I did it on social justice. We have a diversity week. I published an article that literally got me smeared all over the place. All I said was we need to be focused on intellectual diversity as opposed to racial and ethnic diversity. That we need to be looking at where people are coming from and their perspectives. In the sociology classrooms, in the anthropology classrooms, everywhere, I was called a racist, a bigot, somebody intolerant. And you know what this racist, bigoted, intolerant person did? He had an hour on his radio show devoted to the topic and said, call in. He had the student body president come in to the studio and say, I don't just disagree with what you said, Jimmy, I object to what you said. It was such a civil conversation. A liberal friend of mine who listened said, it's too civil for NPR. They won't take you, Jimmy. I embraced it. I said, let's have a discussion on these issues. Let's challenge the conventional wisdom. And I said, I'm ready for the debate. I took phone calls. I had them in. And we had it, and it was respectful. And it was a good discourse. I think I was able to actually say, no, I'm not coming at this from a perspective that race doesn't matter in some way. It can influence your perspective. That's what I care about. But that's not the only diversity that we should be focused on. But it stirred that controversy. Campus safety even put me on their watch list. To make sure that I was okay, I think, because I was buddy-buddy with all of them. They were good conservatives. They were my most loyal listeners out there on the quad every night to watch it and keeping safe. But regardless, the point is that I took that approach. And I said, I'm going to make sure that the dissenting view is heard. And I'm going to do it in the best way that I can. Now, in that story about the global warming thing, there was one caveat. The faculty advisor of the school radio station said, okay, we've got this global warming email, blah, blah, blah. We sent this response. But I do want to give you a few tips on how you can improve your radio show. And I said, well, when's the last time you listened to it? And he said, about 6 months ago. I think you should listen to the program again and hear where it comes. You know, how it's changed, how it's done. The point I'm making is that I was willing to say, I'm not going to accept you can give me your recommendations. I'm only going to accept them if you're actually listening. And that's the same thing we have to do. Is we have to listen to other people, because if you're going to catch their interest, be able to inform them, be able to inspire them, get them involved, you have to know where they're coming from. Know your audience, know their perspective. And so again, interest. Inform, inspire, and involve. And when you're doing that informed step, try to keep it down to a minimal in terms of the stats, because people can only take so much. But we can revitalize conservatism. We can rediscover liberty in this country. Each and every one of us, though, needs to pick up the torch, carry it on the relay, and fight the good fight. And how are we going to do that? We're going to establish that product, and we're going to message it right. And we are going to take America back and become that shining city upon a hill that good old Ronald Reagan said we were, and that we always have been. Let us not lose that freedom for the next generation. Let us fight for it and keep it going. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger.
do that Jimmy takes with him. What will Reagan do t-shirt? Because I do think Jimmy is one of the many answers.